sincerity, I think, really is the only way to go. Being honest with yourself and with whoever you're meeting with. Everybody is somebody. So if it was a big star or just somebody on the street, you treat everybody the same. And I still go by that. I mean, one little smile or a kind word can be a tipping point for somebody who's having a bad time or a bad day.
That was Tom Grant. Tom is a respected singer and songwriter in Nashville with a long and diverse career in music and television. As a songwriter, he wrote songs for Tammy Wynette, Eddy Arnold, Ray Price, Mickey Gilley, Janie Fricke, and Charlie McLean. As a performer, he sang with the Glenn Miller Band, spent 17 years as a regular on Ralph Emery's early morning TV show, and 8 years as a regular on TNN, the Nashville Network's Nashville Now. He also appeared on Hee Haw and Pop Goes the Country. In this Squeeze the Day, let's learn about how growing up in a Happy Days type environment in Milwaukee built a solid foundation for his life.
We're glad you joined us to hear these inspiring stories from older adults, people who have so much experience and words of wisdom to share, but are sometimes overlooked in society today. I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, a Nashville-based nonprofit. Our mission is to support, champion, and enhance the lives of those 50 and older.
And I'm Susan Sizemore, your guide through these beautiful conversations with those who are living life to the fullest and who know how to squeeze the day in their second chapter of life. Now, in my second chapter and encore career, I'm following my passion for sharing the stories of older adults with you and with the world. Because of that, we're now doubling up on our episodes each month. If you like what you hear, please rate and follow Squeeze the Day on your favorite podcast platform. Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, it's great seeing you. And we're kind of trading hats. I many times would sit in to interview people.
Yeah, this is my opportunity to grill you.
Good. Hey, I'm ready to be grilled.
So we first met back in the early days of TNN, the Nashville Network, which was early in the days of cable TV for those who are young enough to barely remember. Let's talk about those formative years and how you ended up as a regular performer on Nashville Now.
Well, okay, Joe Hostetler was a producer of the TNN. It was going to be a news show. And at that time, I was a regular on a local TV show. Now, this was before cable. Okay, so there were just the three networks, maybe four, and this was an NBC affiliate. And I just started going down there because they had a live TV show with a live band. A friend of mine, Darlene Austin, invited me down. So I sang a few times as a guest, and Ralph said, why don't you come on down more often? So that started the ball rolling, and maybe about 12 or 13 years into my internship there, he said, we're doing a national TV show, and it's going to be called Nashville Now, and we'd like you and Lori Morgan and Darlene Austin to be regulars. The very first show was actually at Opryland at the Stage Door Lounge, and the first guests were T.G. Shepherd, somebody else, maybe the Juds, and myself. And so we aired live, and it was at that time, it was via satellite. And eventually the show really caught on with the country audience, and there were millions of people watching it. It had a good long run.
You mentioned Ralph. What role did Ralph Emery play in your life?
I had known Ralph for a very long time, and we were friends. I got to know him, and of course, for anybody else that might not know him, he was like the DJ. In fact, he won an award one time, Susan, as DJ of the Century. Now, this was for all genres. This was rock, pop, country. The guy was just iconic, but he started out actually on WSM All-Night Trucker Show, which was back in the 40s. And so this is when Clear Channel radio really was Clear Channel. There wasn't a lot of interference in between. So he was going all the way up to Canada, all the way down to Puerto Rico. Long story short, he wound up taking a fellow named Bobby Lord's place on a Channel 4 show called The Ralph Emery Show. And the ratings suddenly just went out the roof. I mean, we had 70 to 80% of the audience. We were the biggest lead into the Today Show in the country. And you speak about the Today Show, one of our early guests and friends was Robin Roberts.
Oh, wow.
She used to work at Channel 4, so I've kept in touch with her a little bit. She's an old friend, but a lot of people got their start on that show, the Juds, and he would just have people drop in, Barbara Mandrell and Ed Bruce and George Jones. They would just pop in sometimes because it was that kind of a show. It was loose. In fact, we had live sponsorships. And people were in line. It was the most expensive time in town, but people were lined up to get it because it was so successful. As opposed to today, if you had a bid going, that 1 minute spot could go 3 minutes. So, because it was live TV. So we really became water cooler talk for all of Nashville and the surrounding area. We went up over 100 miles radius, and it was a very popular show.
That's so cool. Really, really interesting. And I remember he called the Juds the Soap Sisters, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And that's because Naomi made her own lye soap at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, they were country gals, Naomi and Winona. Winona at the time was about 14, 15 years old when they started on that show. And they became regulars, and eventually a fellow named Woody Bowles managed them and took them over to RCA. They played about 3 songs, and the rest is history. They were signed immediately. It was a good time. It was really a good time for music.
So cool. What great stories. So Nashville has long been an oasis for those seeking a career in the music business. Tell us a bit about your roots and what actually brought you to Nashville.
Well, I started out doing music as a kid with my 2 brothers. We'd sing a lot of the old Kingston Trio songs and things, another name that people might not be familiar with. But I had my own band in a club in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the age of 17.
Oh, wow.
And I hit the road, did a single for a while, but I had a house band there. And eventually, as a lot of people with the dreams of becoming successful in the music business, I wanted to come to Nashville. Nashville was the recording industry, the music city, USA of the world. And so I eventually moved here in 1978, the tail of 78, and just started pitching songs and hitting the streets. And eventually I got a recording contract on an independent label that Gene Autry owned called Republic Records, and had some success. I had a top 10 record. And the business changed. When that deal left me, you all of a sudden join the tens of thousands of people who are trying to get a recording contract. So it was a little tough. I did a little stint on Electro Records and on Curb Records with a group that I had called Trinity Lane. We had some success, but not a great deal. And so most of my career was spent on local TV, doing either the Ralph Emery show or TNN, or I was a pitch man for a couple of businesses here locally. I've had a lot of fun doing that. It's been great. I'm pretty much retired now.
So I understand at one point in your career, you sang with the Glenn Miller Band also?
I did. It was back in 74. I went up to Chicago, actually down to Chicago because I was living in Milwaukee, and auditioned with about 30 other guys. And 2 weeks later, I was in Japan singing as the male vocalist for the Glenn Miller Orchestra.
So you've talked a little bit about people that you've met throughout your career. Tell us a little bit about meeting a young Reba McIntyre.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was on a bus. I think it was called the New Country Acts. And there was a place in Conyers, Georgia, that would host a 3-day event where you would play baseball, you would do some shows. And it was a Billboard reporting station, so it was a big station. And my label said, this is someplace you ought to go. So I was on the bus with the likes of a young John Anderson, a young Reba McIntyre, a guy named Randy Barlow, Earl Thomas Conley. We were all just upstarts at the time. A few of them kind of went by the side. But I remember talking to Reba just briefly. She was married, by the way, to a guy named Charlie at the time, and missing home. And just, I remember her looking out the bus window, and I stopped by her seat, and I just said, I think you've got a great future ahead of you. And then I went on down the way. I didn't, try to, back then I was single, but I wasn't looking for anything other than a friendship and a compliment. And later in life, as things go, every time she'd see me, she'd give me a big hug, and we'd talk a little bit about it. But she had one record out by my eventual producer, by the way, Norrell Wilson, called "You Lift Me Up." Remember that song?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the reason she was on the New Faces program. I remember it like it was yesterday.
So fun, so interesting. Where do you think building relationships has played in your career, and do you think that it's paid dividends throughout the years? I understand your father was quite proficient at that.
Yeah, he was. He was a salesman, and he was a great salesman, and he did a lot of deals just on handshake. That's the way things were done many, many years ago. And so his philosophy, which he passed down to me, is everybody is somebody. So if it was a big star or just somebody on the street, you treat everybody the same. And I still go by that. I mean, one little smile or a kind word can be a tipping point for somebody who's having a bad time or a bad day. I still have songwriters that come up to me that told me I was influential in helping them out 40 years ago. And I don't remember it at all, but the way I look at it, everybody has an opinion, but I had a little bit of a head start as far as being familiar with the town, and they'd ask me advice on what to do, and I gave them the basic format of writing songs and how they might be able to get them pitched. And basically, I just told people to be yourself. If that flies for you, if that works for you, that's fine. And sincerity, I think, really is the only way to go. Being honest with yourself and with whoever you're meeting with, they'll see and recognize if you're a fake or a real person.
Very nice. And I think, for people listening, and even for me too, I've known you for years, but when you look at someone's DNA and start to think back about how life has been influenced by certain factors, I can now see that in you, that definitely the way you treat people, and you've been out in the public as a celebrity for many, many years, you've had to treat everyone like they were your brother or sister or best friend, right?
It's important. I mean, like I say, everybody's somebody. There may be an attractive person to somebody who society might deem as not so attractive. To me, they're all the same. In fact, maybe that other one might garner more attention than the other one, only because they're people too. They have a heart and they have a soul, and they're out there just dealing with life on a daily basis, just as you are. You just treat everybody the same. I've never ever had any airs, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. That's just who I am and who they are. Everybody's somebody.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy about music as a connector and what you do today to keep music alive in your life.
Well, I still sing in church. My philosophy is music is probably the great, really connector of all types of people. I don't care what your background is. Music can move your soul, and good music is very powerful. And so when I sing in church, and maybe it's the meditation part or a time where we have a general communion where people come up and receive the sacraments, if this is done with some music in the background, if it helps deepen their faith in whatever they believe in, and I believe in Christianity, I believe in the basis of Christianity. Some people might abuse that label, but Jesus Christ was a good man, and he set a good example, and that's what you try to convey. So if you're helping somebody to better themselves as a person through music, I mean, what better vehicle than that? I can't think of one, You may be gifted as a speaker, you may be gifted as this or that, but if you're able to connect somebody with somebody through music, that's a great, great vehicle.
As we talk about music and the business, too, I wanted to talk just a little bit about Newcomers to Nashville. Everybody comes here as a singer-songwriter or a musician to make it big. Do you have any insight or lessons you'd like to share with them?
Just be yourself. Yes, you have to have some talent. There are so many songwriters who just don't have the knack. It is one of those things. I think you can acquire some skills in that field, but the way words work out, the way rhymes work out, the way music works out, and basically kind of sticking to some type of formula and yet being unique. Other than that, if you're new to town, it's important to be seen. it's important to make connections with people. It really is a people business. I think that's important, is just to be yourself and get out there. Don't just sit at home and expect it to come to you, because this is a tough town and the competition is huge. You mentioned so many people. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people that come to Nashville, and just a few of them are going to make it. And a lot of that's luck. There's a lot of very talented people. I can tell you throughout the years, songs that have sat around for 20 years, and all of a sudden, You Needed Be by Anne Murray is cut, and she makes a huge hit out of it. One of the greatest people I ever met and got to know a little bit was John Hartford. He wrote one of the greatest country classic songs ever, Gentle on My Mind. And we used to talk because I used to live down in Peru, Illinois, and he was a riverboat captain. But he would come up with story songs, and that just was his moment of magic.
Who recorded Gentle on My Mind?
The first person that made it a hit, I think, was Glenn Campbell.
That's what I thought. That's a classic. Before I forget, as a songwriter, just mention a few of the people. I know that you've had some significant cuts with artists. Do you want to share a little bit?
I've been pretty lucky in that field. It's not been recent, and I will have to say today's country music is not like it was yesterday now. A lot of young people don't even know who some of the people I had cuts by: Eddy Arnold, Tammy Wynette, Mickey Gilley, Ray Price, Janie Fricke. Some of these people recorded some songs of mine, but that was back in the 80s and 90s. And I'm serious. You can talk to some young songwriters. They said, Eddie who?
Yeah.
They don't know who Eddy Arnold was. They don't know who Barbara Mandrell is. They'll remember Dolly because she's had so much staying power.
Yeah.
It's a different field right now, and I'm not saying it's bad. I don't particularly enjoy a lot of it because I think a lot of it is formulated. A lot of the new songwriters think they've discovered drinking beer in pickup trucks. And, that's something that we've been doing for the last 50 years as songwriters. But if it works, and if there's somebody buying it, I guess that would be a measure of success in this business.
Yeah. Very interesting. And congratulations on all that success. I knew you back then and thought you were fabulous, but I didn't know that you were that fabulous. So
and a couple of them were singles. Some of them were, most of them were just album cuts. But there's
great.
There's stories with every one of them. And I was thrilled to hear some of my music on the radio. That's probably the biggest thrill of a songwriter, is to hear somebody doing your tune. That's good stuff.
Do checks still show up in your mailbox?
A little bit. Now, my last BMI check was for $180, and they're quarterly. They come in quarterly, but a lot of times it's less than that. But after I had a hit, like there was a girl named Charlie McLean. You remember Charlie? Okay, she had a number one song of mine that I co-wrote with my friend Eddie Burton called Dancing Your Memory Away. Not dance, sing, dance in. And it made us we each split, a couple $100,000 on it. So
wow.
It got a lot of airplay. It was significant enough at that time, but after they quit playing it, after it's not in rotation anymore on the radio stations, those checks get pretty small.
Well, no, very interesting, though, just to kind of learn a bit about, how people are paid. And I've heard people joke about, my last check was $2 or something, but $170, $180
Sure.
would buy you dinner downtown, right?
Well, yeah. That was kind of a nice surprise, because up until then, they were usually about $35, $40, which is fine. I'm glad somebody's still playing that music and some of the other songs I've cut. But it dwindles down pretty quickly. If you're coming to town to make it big financially as a songwriter, you better be darn good. That's all I can say. Because what's happening today is so many of the artists are either co-writers, and big name writers will call up a new artist that was just signed by Sony or MGM or RCA, whoever. And they'll say, hey, let's write, how are you going to turn down some guy who's had so much success? But that's what they do. So they become secondary or co-writers. I can tell you so many stories. I've got a good friend who I'm writing with next week named Roger Allen Wade. He wrote a song called Volunteer State of Mind, and he pitched it to Hank Williams Jr. And Hank Williams Jr. changed it to Country State of Mind. And that was a big hit for him, and of course he took half the credit for it as well. But, half of that is better than half of nothing, So Roger pretty much wrote the song, but Hank had some input. There's definitely Hank was a good writer too, very good. That was just a small example. There's so many things that happen later in life, and publishing comes into play because that's where some other people can make some money on it. Being a songwriter, getting mechanical sales, and then you get royalties for airplay. A lot of new songwriters, they don't know how to go about it. If they can hook up with a good publishing company, that helps out a lot. The publisher will take basically half of everything that you make, but they will also invest in you, and they'll give you maybe a writer's draw. And that may be the only income that you have as a brand new person in town. So, sometimes $300 a week doesn't go far, but, it'll help pay the rent.
Right. Very interesting. So, 50 Forward, and as a nonprofit, one of our values is connecting older adults to one another and to resources so they can live longer and healthier lives. How does that value fit with your life?
I think it's a great outlet. If you are a senior citizen, I'm 73, I just turned 73, be engaged, get out there and do something. Now, 50 Forward offers that opportunity. They have about 3 or 4 different places in town, and it's a place where you can meet other seniors. You can benefit by some of their programs. They have classes for maybe art classes or computer classes or teaching classes. But for many people, it's an opportunity to get to know other seniors, which is a great tool for finding out that you're not alone in this world. If you are going through some problems, some health issues, some loneliness, whatever, just being engaged and talking to other people. Maybe you've lost your spouse, or maybe you're not connected with your family anymore. What a great way to get together with people of your own age, where you have so many similar likes and dislikes and challenges in life. Because let's face it, as we get older, we will be challenged, there's no doubt.
Let's talk a little bit about your health journey, because you've had some interesting things that have rocked your boat a bit, as we all have.
Yeah, they did. I have what's called Alan Jackson laughs about it. It's called CMT, which is country music also, but it's a neurological hereditary disease, and it's progressive. It's similar in some ways to MS. And I have had that for at least 20 years. Wow. I know Alan has been fighting it for at least 10 years. And he's having his struggles, but he also, he's a great writer, a great artist, and I'm very glad that he's vocal about it, that he came out and told people that this is what he's going through, because when he does a concert, some of the symptoms are your shortness of breath. Sometimes you have some imbalance that it affects your extremities, your motor and sensory nerves, but like sometimes you can't even feel your feet, so you're prone to falling down. I have some balance issues myself. So it's something you just deal with. They're making some strides. They're doing some clinical trials. And there are more people that have it than you would suspect, even though it's kind of a rare genetic disease. There's over 3 million people that have been diagnosed with it around the world. And that's probably a small number of people that have this that haven't been even reported it. A lot of people don't know it. But if anybody ever wants to look it up, it's named after 3 doctors, I think from the Mayo Clinic origin, and it's Charcot-Marie-Tooth. And if you type in CH instead of S, it'll probably pop up for you, because it is a neurological disorder that there is no real cure for. So you just you deal with it. It's probably going to shorten my life a little bit, but hopefully not a lot. I'm still going to the store on a regular basis. I go to dinner. I get out and do things. I sing at church. I take my cane with me. And another thing that I want to tell people who have been viable all their lives in getting around, if you have to use a physical aid like a cane or a walker or whatever you may be challenged with in life, embrace that. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get out. Don't just stay at home. I talked to my wife, Beverly, by the way, who came up with the name 50 Forward. But I said, I don't see a lot of people out there going out into the world in wheelchairs or with walkers and things. And then I realized it's because a lot of them just stay home. And that's sad. I think people We all have challenges. I don't care who you are. Anytime you hit 70, 80, 90, you are going to have something about you that's not what you had, even if it's your lack of abilities that you had when you were 40. You're going to slow down. We're living longer now than we ever did. But don't be afraid to go out in public and be who you are, because it doesn't change a person. It changes your physical abilities, but if you sit down and talk to somebody, it's you. Whoever you were maybe 30, 40 years ago, that's still a very, very viable person on the inside, and that's what you have to concentrate on. I don't care what your malady is.
Mm-hmm. Very strong messages there. Have you learned some lessons about yourself through these ups and downs?
Well, I think so, and I think that anybody that's challenged later in life with whatever you're dealing with, if it's heart disease or cancer or some other type of thing, if you allow yourself to realize just how lucky you are and how fortunate you are to still be here. And let's face it, there are a lot of people that go through depressions. I'm not saying that everybody is just, happy-go-lucky all the time, because challenges come about in life, and they can be very difficult. And they can make you shake your head and look in the mirror and say, is this it? What's going on here? But the fact of the matter is, you got to, first of all, deal with it and then, move on. And believe me, I realize it's not always easy to do so, but this is where a place like 50 Forward could come in handy. It's not just seeing a doctor or a therapist, which you should also embrace if that's what you feel you need, but it's getting out there and being relevant in some fashion. Even if you don't think you are, you are. If you're at 50 Forward and you see somebody in the hallway and you say hi to them, that could change their day.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a difference.
And something about 50 Forward, so we've expanded now to 7 locations, and we also
Sure,
have...
okay, wow.
Yeah, and we also have an adult day program where people who might need a little bit more help and might not be able to stay at home, we've expanded that program to 2 locations. So bottom line, I think you're sharing some really valuable points that we acknowledge, but we don't necessarily talk about a lot. I wanted to ask you a couple of speed round of questions, like what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, boy. Save money.
So is there one artist that you'd like to record with?
I mentioned Dolly Parton before. This gal is, you talk about someone who's genuine. What you see is what you get.
What's your favorite song of all time?
Oh, boy. One of the best written songs, I think, is a tune by Harry Chapin called Taxi. There are a lot of great Christian music, I listen to that as well, because what we sing in church, it's called the Life Teen Mass. So it's geared more toward the younger audience. And I love some of the old classics. I love some traditional Southern gospel. It's touching people in a special way, and it makes them maybe deepen their faith.
So moving away from music just for a moment, favorite sports team?
Well, I'm from Milwaukee, so the Milwaukee Brewers. I love baseball, and they're doing very well, by the way. It's a small market team, but they're first in their division, so I will celebrate that, and I will be with them, win or lose.
So I have 2 questions that we ask all of our guests, and one is, what's one piece of advice that either your parents or an older adult shared with you that at the time you thought, this is silly, but now it rings true in your everyday life?
Tom Brokaw wrote a recent book. He's the one who wrote that book about the greatest generation. Well, he's got a new book. It pretty much gravitates toward his growing up years, but it's don't give up. No matter what you're doing, if you don't succeed, that old saying about it's not falling down that counts, it's how you get up, and you keep moving. So I would think that type of staying power, first of all, be sincere and be honest. And I don't care who you are, at some point in your life, you thought maybe the better out would be to say something that wasn't exactly true. And you usually pay for that later on. If nothing else, you pay for it in your conscience. So be honest, be honest. Sometimes the truth hurts. And here again, don't quit. Don't give up. Just keep moving. And you'll find that one thing leads to another. If you get out, all of a sudden you realize, hey, this is pretty cool. And I wouldn't have done this if I wouldn't have gotten off that lazy boy.
Mm-hmm. So Tom Grant, what is it that you do to squeeze the day?
wake up every day grateful who I am. I get up on my own, which is a blessing. I'm able to still see, which is a blessing. I look in the mirror and I recognize who I am. And that's a pretty cool thing too, because, there's going to be a time where maybe that doesn't happen anymore. I just embrace the day. I get up early every day. I get up 4:30, 5 o'clock every single day because I don't want to miss anything. I love watering my plants. I love getting out in the yard. I built a lot of railings because of my imbalance issues. And so just live every moment like it was your last. And that sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. You're going to have down times and you're going to have quiet times, but make something of yourself. Make something of that day. Don't waste it away just, vegetating, and get out there.
Thank you for joining us today. Your story is inspiring and reinforces that challenges can become opportunities. We can learn so much from one another and certainly from the experiences of those in their second chapter of life. Now we challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day. Squeeze the Day is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy this podcast, please help us continue to share inspiring stories of older adults and visit 54.org. That's FIFTYFORWARD.org to make a contribution. Now, as I leave you today, I'm sending you all a big squeeze. Until next time.